Assalamu folks, welcome to our final podcast of the season. This is Hashim here. I'm joined by Zahid, the commissioner. Z, what's going on, buddy?
Hey Hashim, how you doing?
Good, yourself?
Good, alhamdulillah.
First off, again, congratulations to you and the Abbasids on winning the championship this year.
Well, what can I say? It was a pretty miraculous season. I don't think anybody after a few weeks of the season would have expected it would turn out this way, but that's why we play the games.
It's interesting because I think a lot of people had you guys pegged as one of the favorites at the beginning of the season with the original Abbasids roster before the trade, obviously. And tumultuous year, a lot of ups and downs, and squeaking in sixth place. So essentially, though you had a pretty comfortable lead over us in the Seljuks, nonetheless, there was still a possibility that come the final day of the season, you wouldn't have made the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. Seasons, right? And we had Chu on in our last podcast where we kind of talked about teeing up the playoffs and what to expect. I think it was a wide open race for every team going into the playoffs, right? Even though we were the sixth place team, you could argue that the first place team, second place team, or even the fifth place team had just as good a chance of getting through to the finals. And I think we talked about it in the last podcast that this is probably the first season where you could, with some confidence, say that there's going to be a non-bye team that will either get into the finals or ultimately win the finals. And that's exactly what happened. We had two non-bye teams that got to the finals, and one of them won it all. That was the sixth seed. So it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing because we talked about this on our last pod too, but essentially the top two teams had all the momentum going against them going into the playoffs. Whether they were sitting in top because they had a great middle of season, but they really didn't look their best going into the playoffs. And essentially, I mean, if you look at the stats, obviously they were the favorites with the bye and what history tells you. But a lot of chatter around the league was saying that neither team was really favored against the team they're going to match up against. If the Nussers had beat you guys, they may have still been the favorites in that semifinal. And likewise, if the Mughals beat the Mamluks, people may have said the same thing about against the Ottomans. So it's really interesting that despite having such good seasons and being very good teams, because as you mentioned, it was so close, it was just interesting that the top two were almost written off for some reason.
I wouldn't say they were written off, but in previous years, and we talked about this in the last podcast, usually going into the playoffs, you can say with some certainty the number one or number two seed team is going to make it to the finals for sure, right? Because in previous years, last year, the Mamluks team was so good that you couldn't see them losing in a semifinal game. And in the previous years, we've had the Mughals, Ottomans, and Mamluks teams that have been so good that there was almost a certainty that they would get to the finals. This year, I think it's so wide open because of the draft and how teams are so even across the season. It was hard to say that with some certainty that any one of the Ayyubids or Ottomans were going to get to the finals for sure, because the other teams were just as talented, right? It depended on how teams played on that particular day.
No, for sure. So I guess I personally thought the best matchup was the Nussers against you guys, so we'll cover that one second. But Mughals Mamluks was a close game too. It was a back and forth affair. The Mamluks had control of the game for the most part. The Mamluks did show up. The Mughals did show up. We had an injury scare with Osama. I hope he's doing well after he had an awkward bounce on Birchwood 1, which led to a bit of a ball coming to his face, and he's healing well according to his family. So glad to hear. Pretty crappy to come in, play 4 games in the fifth inning. Literally have to go to the hospital to address that. So we hope he's doing well, and glad to hear that he's doing better. But I mean, that was an interesting game. But it seems like the Mamluks had a hold of that one, and then they won up against the the Ayyubids, right?
The Ayyubids, yeah. So the Mamluks obviously came into the playoffs with a ton of momentum. They had that going for them. There's a lot of chatter that said that side of the bracket was significantly easier because you had the Ayyubids that had lost 4 straight. You had the Mughals that had, I think, 1 or 2 wins in their last 8 games, right? So the Mamluks certainly had the most momentum out of all 3 of those teams. So I think everybody kind of thought the Mamluks had a more than 50% chance of getting through to the finals. provided they were able to keep their offense going, which is exactly what happened. So they kind of coasted. It was, even though the Moguls game was pretty close. I heard it was a 1 or 2 run game going into the 5th inning. And then after the Osama injury, it just kind of changed everything.
Yeah,
right?
they had to kind of
because Rayhan had to go from pitching to shortstop, and then Rehab had to come into pitch. So obviously, you don't want that happening in a playoff game, and a game of that magnitude, right? But after that, I didn't get a chance to see the Ayyubids game, but I heard the Mammoose controlled it from start to finish.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I was there because I score kept that game, and it unfortunately wasn't close. I mean, the Mammoose put up a 7 spot, I think, in like the 3rd or 4th inning. After it was a tie game, so they were up, and then from there it was basically 9-2, and then they just chipped away at it in a few more runs, and the Ayyubids had nothing to answer back, which was tough. But so that led to the Mammoose going into the finals.
Yeah.
Yours had a bit more fireworks involving the Abbasids. We'll get to the semifinal in a second, but again, as I mentioned, I thought the most unpredictable game was the Nasrids Abbasids, where I thought it was pretty much evenly split amongst people as to which one's going to win. I mean, you had the Nasrids, who had the best offense going into the playoffs, and the pitcher of the year, right? I mean, we'll talk about that after, but whenever you have the best offense and you have the best pitcher, it's really tough to bet against those guys, right?
Yeah, and like we talked about this in our pregame, chatter. It's always an advantage to be the home team in a playoff game.
Yeah.
In a do or die game, because you get to bat last.
No question.
But the advantage of being the visitor team is if you put up big runs in that first inning, puts a lot of pressure on the home team, right? And that's kind of what happened. We put up 10 runs in the first 2 innings, and we held them to 3, and then they were chasing the entire game. Their offense didn't click. They didn't hit many home runs, even though they had the most home runs throughout the season.
Yeah.
They scored 5 runs in the last inning, I think, on 2 home runs. But outside of that, they really didn't have a ton of offense. And it was, we think it was because the pressure was on them. Every guy that came up knew that they were chasing. They had to produce runs. They had to go for the big hits. And then sometimes that affects your game. And then once you're that far behind, then it's really difficult to catch up. So if we probably were to play that game again, the outcome probably would be not as distant as it was, right? I think we were up 17-6 going into the final inning.
Yeah.
Right. It's never going to be that far apart if we ever play the Nasrids again. But it is what it is. That's why you play these 1-game eliminations. Anything can happen, right? If we didn't score runs in that first inning and the Nasrids put up a 6 spot, then outcome would have been completely different.
No, for sure. I mean, yeah, anything can happen, right? I mean, like anything can happen, as in like Kyrgyzstan now cannot win a championship, right? That can happen. Like it shows you that you never know what to expect, right?
He was so upset afterwards.
I don't blame him.
He was so upset afterwards.
I don't, now he's just a guy. I was like that in soccer. He was like, oh yeah, Hashim's a good luck chart. As soon as you lose, like no one cares about you. You get ranked in E in the pre-draft rankings, in the worst bracket. But anyways, we can move on from that. Semifinal, Ottomans, Abbasids. Really tight affair, slow scoring affair. The Ottomans kind of game, right? They had you wherever they wanted you. I mean, I think it was 8-8 going into extra innings, but that's Ottomans baseball for you this season, right? They like to keep it close. They don't put up big numbers, but they have a solid defense. And Doc was a beast on the mound, and holding your offense to 8 runs is no, you can't ask more of your team.
Yeah, going
right?
through 7 innings, only producing 8 runs. You almost lose those games every.
And it was
time.
1 inning, right? I think it was the second or third inning was you had a big inning. Other than that, it was just chipping away. And for them, they played their game. It's a couple of 1 run here, 2 runs here. And
yeah, anybody that watched that game, the Ottomans had at least 2 or 3 chances to put that game away, and they kind of let us slip, and they let us back in the game, and that's kind of when things turn. Sometimes you need luck. I told our guys this, and I've told anybody that talks to me about the games. You always need a little bit of luck to win. I've won it a few times now, and I know that for a fact. Sometimes when luck goes your way, you got to take advantage of it and make the opponents pay, and that's kind of what happened, right? We had that where we were down to our last out, or even maybe down to our last strike, and we were able to produce a run. And then in the bottom half of that inning, Archie pulled a home run that was certainly over the fence back into play, and he caught it, and that resulted in the second out of that inning. And then in the extra innings, We were fortunate we had the top of our order coming up, and we put up the runs which we expected we would, and they had the bottom of their order coming, so we knew we had the advantage there. So sometimes you just gotta take advantage of the cards you're dealt, and kind of make the most of it, and that's what we did. Honestly, when we left that Ottomans game, that was probably the craziest game that I've ever played. Right, I played a lot of games. I played a lot of games in BSL. I haven't played a game the Nusrat's finals that we played. That was very close. That was neck and neck the entire way. But this just was like we were biting our nails the entire game because we knew this wasn't our type of game. This was the Ottomans type of game. Yeah, it was
totally in their wheelhouse.
Totally their game, right? When you watch basketball and whatnot, you're playing at their pace. We were playing at their pace in that game, right? It was everything exactly they wanted to play. It just so happened that we got a couple of lucky bounces, and then we were able to take advantage of it in that extra inning.
I'm looking at the stats right now, and I mean, it was extra innings, obviously. So, for those that don't know, Mr. September Yusuf Chaudhry hit a big grand slam to put the game away, but only 13 hits for in an eight inning game. I mean, shouts to Doc. That's crazy to hold this lineup to that. And I guess you include if you had the grand slam, then you must have had maybe 10 hits maybe going into the eighth.
No, in that extra inning, it started off with me getting a walk, Mokala hitting a single, Bilal hitting a single, Crazy lining out, and then Chu hitting the grand slam. Right, so we got 3 hits in that final inning.
Yeah,
so you subtract that from the total, and we only had 10 hits. 10
hits
over seven innings, right? That's obviously a great pitching game and great defensive game. So
and that brought us to our Sunday final, number 6 against number 5. The Mamluks against the Abbasids. So heading into the final, obviously, it was anyone's guess. A lot of people it could have gone either way. Both of you had momentum going in, right? You both had really good showings at Super Sunday. You both obviously had really good showings during the playoffs. Yeah. As you might, the Mamluks had a bit of an easier route in just because of the way the games turned out for them. And I guess playing the earlier day, you get an extra 4 hours of rest, right?
That was a huge advantage because we were playing in the cold at night too,
which helps. Yeah.
By the time we got out of there, I think it was like 10 o'clock, and a couple of us went out for dinner afterwards. I didn't get home till well past midnight, and then by the time you kind of get in bed and recover and let the day kind of soak through and get through your head before you go to sleep, and you wake up the next morning, you're like, damn it, I got to prepare for the finals now. So obviously that does affect you. The Mamluks had 2 guys that stayed back to scout. I think it was Suleiman for sure. I don't remember who the other person was, right? So they kind of had everybody else resting while 2 guys were doing the scouting report. While most of our guys didn't get a chance to do any scouting on the Mamluks earlier in the day.
Yeah, I mean, you're so focused on your games.
We were preparing for our games, right? So that was an advantage that they had. But the thing that we kind of, or the Abbasids kind of came into Sunday looking for was we couldn't have played a more difficult game than we did the night before, right? So this game can only be easier, right? So we kind of felt we were the underdogs. We knew everybody was cheering against us, and they were cheering for the Mamluks. So we had nothing to lose. We just had a chip on our shoulders, and we just played our hearts out. And it was a neck-and-neck game the entire way. Even though the score was a little bit more distant than the game was itself, I think over the course of the game, it was neck and neck. The Mamluks led at a couple points in the game, but going into the 7th inning, the Mamluks were up by 1, and then after that, I think we scored 7 or 8 runs, and the Mamluks didn't score anything after that. Yeah. So it basically turned out to be we were neck and neck through 6 innings, and then through 7, 8, 9, the Abbasids bats came alive and kind of just took over.
It's impressive because a lot of talk throughout the season was how, the Mamluks had guys. The guys like obviously Tahir, Hassan, Ismail come up, but Suleiman. The rookies were incredible, right? Suleiman, Umair was seen.
Saqib had a great year too.
Saqib had a great year.
They're very balanced.
Ibrahim Sardar, right? Yeah. So their team was stacked, and if you look at the breakdown, we're looking at the stats right now. They scored a run in every single inning in the first six innings. Yeah. So every single inning, there was production there, whether it was top lineup, bottom lineup, and that's a tough out, right? They were always putting up numbers. It was just
Yeah,
maybe
you
too
talk
much.
to any captain. It's always a difficult or there's two ways of setting up your lineup, right? The Abbasids lineup, it was no secret. Our lineup was set up to be top heavy, right? We put our best hitters 3 through 7, right? With Crazy, Bilal, Yusuf, Samir, right?
Yeah.
Those are our power bats. They're all bunched together in the middle of that lineup. The way the Mamluks set their lineup was a lot more balanced, right? Where they had Ismail, then Hassan Chaudhry hitting 4, then Omer Wasim, then Saqib, then Mohsen, then Suleiman, right? So they spread out their power bats,
Yeah.
right? So there's always two sides to the argument. Like, yes, you can produce more runs consistently in every inning with a balanced lineup, right? But it makes it more difficult to have a 7-run inning because all of your bats can't click at the same time. You may have a couple outs in between, which result in 3 outs, and then now you have a power bat leading off. So it's always a different way of looking at it. It just worked out that in the finals game, we were able to put up 2 7-run innings and I think 1 5 or 6-run inning, which ultimately was the difference in the game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the Mamluks scored after the 6th inning.
No, they didn't.
Like, so that's 7, 8, 9. In the finals, obviously, we play an extra 2 innings. Goose eggs, both innings, right? Again, you talked about the whole nobody believed in us, and I guess as you're putting the hate.
Well, there was a point in the season where we didn't believe in us.
Yeah.
Right? There was a point in the season where we didn't believe in us and we weren't playing to our potential. I mentioned this at the town hall. There came a breaking point in the season. I think it was the final. Actually, it was coincident. It was against the Mamluks. We actually won the game, but we were so pissed off at ourselves and the way we played and stuff that was happening that there's a couple of points where everybody just said, okay, we need a break from each other, right? We need to let everything cool down and whatnot, and then we'll get together. And then at that point, we had a meeting at a McDonald's by Mississauga Valley, where BSL Knights plays. We had a meeting between Bilal, Yusuf, Crazy, myself, Samir.
Thank you for the
Hafiz.
exact location of the McDonald's.
Yeah.
It's very, very, for our listeners, just so you all know, that's where the location
That's where the Abbasids meet up. So we had a meeting, and we basically were just like, we're not playing for each other. That was the problem, right? That's something that when I've been captain or GM of a team, is you got to get guys playing for each other. You have to be rooting for each other. You have to want each other to be successful, right? Whether that means your personal success or not. Like sometimes, or most of the time, guys have to sacrifice for your team to be successful. If you're just focused on your individual accomplishments, then you're taking away from somebody else's opportunity to be successful. So that's the way I look at it. So in that team meeting, we were able to hash all that out. Everybody agreed, yes, we've got to be more team focused. We knew our bottom of our lineup was deadly. We knew we probably had the best bottom of the lineup in the league, but we weren't giving them the opportunity or giving them the motivation to be that best bottom of the lineup. And that's basically the following week. That's what we did, and that's when it turned around. Like those guys like Hamid, Archie, Jav, like those guys were having phenomenal seasons, but they weren't giving the opportunity, or we weren't pushing them to be leaders and kind of turn the tables in our favor. And that's exactly what happened. Throughout those final 4 Super Sunday weeks, it turned out to be those guys carrying the workload for us a little bit, while the top order guys kind of did what they did, but we weren't overly aggressive. Apart from Crazy, who had 1 game where he hit 4 home runs, but apart from that, like we are all just doing what we had to do, and the bottom of the order carried us.
You brought up a lot. I spoke to all of you guys, obviously, individually. There was a lot of talk about the 5 holdovers from the year before and how there was the 5 guys that didn't win a single game last year showed up in that bright orange again. Well, this year, navy and orange. And it probably meant a bit more to them. I mean, obviously, winning a championship for anyone's exciting kind of thing, but they had a bit of an extra thing because they dealt with so much animosity the year before, and there was so much talk about the curse and individual seasons were there, but you can't put it together and win. And I mean, it was proved wrong, right? And you saw both your playoff MVPs were 2 guys, the 2 stars of that team, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like I can't even imagine what those guys went through last year. I lose 2 or 3 games in a row, and it turns into the world's ending, and what do we got to do to change this and change the batting lineup and change all this. But I can't even imagine going an entire season without a win, right? So for those guys, obviously it was it was so sweet because they did it with the same franchise that they were with the previous year. They went winless. They turned it around. Yeah, they were still counted out beginning of the season when the Abbasids were struggling, but everybody held together. Everybody pulled together. Everybody played as a team, and ultimately it changed, right? So for those guys, at least for us, that we were playing for those guys because yeah, we wanted to win ourselves, but those guys, we wanted to win it for them especially.
So who are those 5 guys, just so we can remind our listeners?
Bilal Samir,
Yeah.
Ahmed Butt, Atif Akhtar, and Zaid Ramjan.
Who was the most hype after winning? The one that celebrated the most? 'Cause I have my answer. Because he's still celebrating.
Out of those 5 guys,
Yeah. Or anyone, but my pick
I would say
was
Samir.
Samir? Yeah.
That's what I would think, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, the guy was over the moon because he's played on a lot of bad teams, right? The one good team he played on was when he was with you guys
Yeah.
in the Ottomans. He's been on a lot of bad teams,
That
right?
was
So I told the guy before the playoffs, like, listen, we had a call. We spoke for probably about half hour or whatever. I'm like, listen, man, I know it's been a while since you've been in the playoffs or whatnot, but listen, just be yourself. That's what everybody got to do. I told everybody, just be yourself. Nobody has to be the superstar that turns into the guy who carried the team, right? You just be yourself,
Yeah.
right? The right opportunities will come to you, and then you just take advantage of those opportunities. I don't know. Who did you think celebrated?
Shouts to Sam, man. I love that kid, and he did great, much deserved to have MVP. Zaid Ramjan.
Oh, yeah.
That guy is just so hype.
But bro, his life is a celebration.
It's true, man.
If you follow him on Instagram, his life is a celebration, bro.
Hanging like this
That guy lives the life, bro. Mashallah.
This guy one day Raptors celebrating, next day wins the championship, next day gets engaged, and he's at Nusrat in Istanbul. He's living the life, man. He's just celebrating. So shouts to Zaid, man. Shouts to Ollie Watts, but shouts to Zaid especially. So yeah, I mean that was our season. That was everything that happened on the field. And that brings us to everything about off the field, essentially, with regards to how the season went through and awards and other stuff like that. So, do you want to start off with the big ones, or do you want to start off with the smaller ones? Let's start off with with the one that we mentioned, the 2 being the most important, the way that we look as a board, being contribution and brotherhood award. 2 guys I know very well, you know very well too as well. Hassan Abdul Desert won contribution award, and that award essentially for someone that does what they can and it shows that they make a marked difference in this league by the volunteer and the contributions they make to it. Desert's a guy that's always kept score. He's always been available to help out. He was always, I had the pleasure of playing with him this year. It's my first ever playing with him. And the guy does anything for the team. If you want him to coach, if you want him to do this, if you wanted to set up, he was always willing and able to do that. And it just shows his character, and I'm glad he got the recognition that was much deserved this year on that front.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, anybody that knows him,
everyone loves Desert.
Everybody loves him, right? He's one of the fan favorites of the entire league, right? Everybody loves the kid. He does whatever it takes to help the league, to help his team, to help any individual, right? And there's been so many times, right, because of the way his personality is, where guys kind of tell him, "Hey, Desert, can you go get that for me?" And he never says no.
Never says
no. He's always willing to do it, whether it's for his team, for anybody else. There's been so many times where the ball goes out of play or goes for a home run, and you see Desert sitting around.
He's the guy.
Desert,
exactly.
Can you go get it? And he just goes and gets it. Right? He doesn't complain. He doesn't say anything. So obviously, it's well deserved. There's so many guys that are deserving, but we're glad that we were able to give him the recognition that he deserves.
Definitely. And then as for the brotherhood, we have so many guys, and it's the one we always, it's the only award in which we make sure we shout out every single nominee at the awards banquet, right? The other one is usually top 3 for that one because it's deserved. Every single team, every single person is to be recognized, and every name you see on that list, you're like you can't even argue it. It totally makes sense for what they bring to the game. We often have the same names that come up in the sense because you're kind of guys that contribute, that show that thing. And it's rare that you have, in my opinion, guys that stand out because you're kind of like, hey, they were like, it was not that it was a no-brainer because everyone's worthy kind of thing, but all of us when we were discussing it had one name on our mind before we even looked at nominees. And that guy was Riyad Ramjan, right? He just, again, the epitome of what this league stands for. This is a guy that I haven't had the pleasure of playing with him yet on his team, but just knowing his personality on the field and just the encouragement whenever you're playing with him. He's a great guy to chat with whenever he's playing one of the middle infield spots, or always that positivity with a guy, a huge smile always. willing to do whatever it takes for his team. You saw this year. I mean, this guy played pitcher, he played infield, he played outfield. I mean, he whatever is asked of him, he's going to get his best shot doing, right?
Yeah.
Great character, good dude. He wrote like rumors every single week, which personally meant a lot to me. If you want to win the Brotherhood Award, write rumors because I will vouch like crazy for you because that means a lot to me. But
No, it's not just that. It's a positive energy that he brings, right?
Exactly.
Like, yes, there are a lot of good brothers in the league, more than half of the league, right?
Yeah.
You could at some point argue that they should be deserving of some recognition for their brotherhood or their contributions to the league. But Riyadh is one guy that always brings positive energy. You never see him negative. You never see him get on people. He's always encouraging people to do the right thing. He's always willing to be the team player. Like, I can't think of many people that would be willing to be moved around from pitcher to outfield to infield to back to outfield to pitcher, right? Most guys want that consistency,
yeah.
right? But he's one guy that, even when he played for my team last year, right, we moved him around all over the place. He played shortstop for me a couple of innings or a couple of games. We moved him to second, we moved him to third. For me to play outfield, right, whatever, right? So he's just a guy who, like you said, is a true character. He's basically the type of person that values or shows the value of the entire league. So I don't think anybody could argue. I think when his name was announced, everybody was like, for sure, right? That he definitely is deserving, right? Everybody gets their opportunity. Like guys like Zayn Malik and whatnot have already won it because they also carry that same type of characteristic, right? But it's great that these guys are all friends, right? So they basically are the type of guys that we want in the league, right?
Exactly.
We want to build that more types of guys like that, more character like that, where they also don't take the game too seriously, right? The game winning is important. Obviously, those guys want to win as much as most guys, right? But they don't push the limits when it comes to that.
As an aside, just shouts to Sood Ramjan, since we're in the Ramjan portion of the podcast, talking about Zayd, talking about Riyadh, but Sood had a great season too, like probably a career year, so shouts to him. Other awards, I mean, some of them were kind of wrote themselves.
Like them were winning Rookie of the Year. Yes, we had great rookies this year.
It was interesting because in the beginning of the season, it was like it's Abdullah or nobody, and then Suleiman made some noise, and then
Safwan made some noise.
Safwan made some noise in the beginning of the season, and then like T just ran away with it.
He just ran away with it, right?
Like,
the second half that he had, it started before the second half, but he carried it on and he kind of blew it open in the second half, right? So he was a no-brainer. Crazy winning Offensive Player of the Year. The numbers that he put up, it was hard to argue that anybody else deserved to win.
That last weekend, what he did in the last weekend, 6 home runs, 16 RBIs is insane.
Yeah, right. So it was hard to argue against that. Some other awards were a lot closer. Like Pitcher of the Year was pretty close between Tansir, Ibrahim, and Doc. And I think the first time that we've actually seen a 4-player race for MVP.
Yeah,
like when you're calculating the results, right? For the players that don't know. The voting process was the GM's vote. You can't vote for your own team. Then the assistant GM's vote. And then for the first time, we allowed our top volunteers to have a vote, which wasn't equal to a GM or an AGM vote. It was 1/16 of a vote. So basically, they just decided tiebreakers if they were ties. And then the MVP voting was a 4-player race, and I think it was decided by maybe 3 or 4 points between 1 and number 4. So it was very close all around.
Could have gone either way. The 4 guys that were in question were obviously Crazy, Rayhan, Batar, and the winner Ismail.
Yeah.
Surprised that it was Ismail?
I don't think I was surprised. You couldn't argue that he wasn't deserving.
Yeah.
You could argue that other guys were just as deserving, but you couldn't make
sure.
the argument that he wasn't deserving, right? Just
Absolutely.
because of the impact that he had on his team. I think I was looking this up at some point. The Mamluks only lost 1 game when Ismail was on their team, because the final weekend he wasn't there, and then the first 2 weekends he wasn't on the team. So while he was on that team, they only lost 1 or 2 games, right, over the course of 6 or 7 weeks. That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, no, right? I mean, and just if you just look at his numbers whenever he got hot was absolutely insane, right? And he was hitting opposite home runs like it was nothing. Like it was just
he was playing
confidence at another level.
Yeah, right. So Ismail's had great years before, but I think this year is when he absolutely played to his potential. right? Like you've seen guys
Unreal.
like Rayhan have phenomenal years. You've seen guys like Crazy have phenomenal years, right? Botar's had phenomenal year almost
Yeah.
every year. But this year, Ismail kind of jumped into that same category.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
of
No,
guys.
exactly. It's usually you had a few guys at that top, and Ismail put his name rightly so in that conversation. Absolutely. Other awards, as you mentioned, Crazy got most outstanding offensive player. We talked about rookie of the year. We're missing Gold Gloves. Kind of were no surprises on.
Yeah,
Gold
I don't think there was
Gloves.
any surprises. The outfield Gold Gloves, you kind of expected guys like
Yeah.
Arlet, Imran, Omer Jabbar, and Oais to win it.
Yeah.
And even the infield was pretty straightforward with I think Mokala and Imran Qureshi were very close.
Yeah.
Second base, Zayn Malik had a pretty comfortable lead from what
Yeah.
I can remember.
Second one, right?
Yeah, his second one in a row. Gibran shortstop again, and
Yeah.
then Shazad got a Gold Glove again at third base. So
Yeah.
there was really no surprises there.
Ibrahim was pitcher.
Ibrahim pitcher, that's right.
Which was really good. So I'm trying to think of other awards. I think we covered everything. There's nothing that we're missing.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we got it.
Most improved.
Most improved Hassan Zubair, obviously, the numbers he put up this year,
Unreal.
right? They were unreal. He brought himself into the top 5
Yeah.
in terms of batting average this
Yeah.
year, right? Coming from, I think he was like an average 450, 500 hitter.
Yeah.
Right. So it was a huge jump. There were other guys like Ducky who also had a fantastic year.
Yeah. Hamza Wahid had a great year.
Hamza Wahid, Omar Jabbar had a great year, right?
Yeah.
But I think Hassan was just at another level this year.
So that's awards basically, and then so we had our awards banquet. We're taping this on a Friday night, the 18th. So we had our awards banquet yesterday, and the second portion of that was the town hall. Obviously, what we do in the town hall, for those of you that weren't there, we appreciate all of you that were there. We had about 30 people that were there, not including
No,
us.
there's almost 40.
There was almost 40 people there. It's almost half the league. So it shows that we put together the town hall with the intention of, we always say this, and I don't mean to sound corny or cliche again, but although we have a board that runs this league and there's 4 of us, we run it with the view of the other 92 guys in the league. And we started having the town hall a couple of years ago because we wanted to have the voice of the league be heard. The last one we had was was very long, longer than this one.
Yeah,
it was,
for sure.
It was just
There's a
that.
lot of topics in
There's
that
a
one.
lot of topics. It led to a lot of changes. I mean, that led to changing keepers from 2 to 1. That led to a lot more rules and a better understanding of what to include and not to include in the rumors. And it led to a lot of other good conversations. I can say the same thing about this year. This year I thought was especially important because we had a pretty cagey year. We had it was super competitive, and speaking for myself and speaking from what I heard from other people was the brotherhood element started coming after the softball element, which is inevitable whenever your leagues is better and whenever competition's in play. But it was something that disappointed us and disappointed other people in the league in terms of losing some of those foundational principles, what we look for in the league, and that's something we want to talk about. And we had some really good comments from different people and a lot of statements. But there was the best thing about that was everyone in the room agreed that some things that sometimes it was taken too far. We lost that element, and it changed the dynamic and the image of the league in that sense, and it has to be brought back to whatever it was in the past.
Yeah, I think everybody kind of had the sense that was starting to become a problem.
And whether you're the first name on the list, whether you're the 12th man, every single person agreed that.
Right, and so I think it also was profound that our MVP of the season was the one who wanted to speak out first about it and bring up the aspect that he kind of felt that this year was far more competitive and not as brotherly and not as enjoyable for him especially and for other players as well. I felt the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about why that happened and how we can kind of reverse that trend, right? Obviously, we have to take that into consideration for next year and how we do that. What's the right way to do it and whatnot. But it was important that we got agreement from all the people that were there, or majority of the people that were there, that this is starting to become a problem, and we want to kind of reverse that trend. Because yes, the league has gotten far better over our 6 seasons. The talent pool that we have in the league now with players coming in and whatnot has gotten far better, right? But at the same time, I don't think we've gotten brothers or people that are negatively impacting it, but it's just become a general trend.
I think that's
started.
exactly it. I think I can't name a single person that has a malicious intent in this league. But the problem with competition is if certain guys are approaching it a certain way, you're going to be left behind if you don't approach it a certain way. So
Yeah.
if everyone else is, for lack of better words, dropping their gloves, you're going to feel the need to drop their gloves too. And it may have happened amongst GMs this year. It may have happened amongst players this year, teammates, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of like if there's that added oomph of competition in place, you're going to have to go to that next level to match other people's intensity and to match other people's idea of what it takes to win.
Yeah, and I don't think it ever got to that point where guys were ready to get in a fist fight. Or,
No, sorry, I didn't mean it that way.
I know, but
I mean like the intensity.
yeah,
of course.
but you can almost expect, no matter how brotherly we make the league or how whatever league you play in, when you get into the playoffs, it typically becomes a little bit more competitive, a little bit more chirpy, if you want to call it that. So you kind of expect that going into playoffs.
Yeah.
And we always do a reminder for teams when they get in the playoffs is listen, yes, it is more competitive. It is going to be more intense and whatnot, but try to control yourselves and your temper and what you say to other teams and whatnot. So you kind of expect that in the playoffs. But we saw that kind of intensity show up in the regular season this year for the first time, right? Which is what kind of took everybody back, and that's kind of what started that trend. So we'll have to see how we address that. But like you said, the important thing was everybody agreed that it was a problem, that we want to reverse that trend. We want to kind of bring that brotherhood element back. There's numerous suggestions that were given. We'll take those into consideration and see what's the best way to address it.
Two other major things that were addressed that I wanted to bring up.
Don't say jerseys, please.
No, there's a lot of talk about jerseys, and honestly, like as a board, we don't care. We'll revisit that for like 10 minutes during the off season, but we appreciate all the comments on the collars and the colors. Two major things I thought was number one, trades. We had a lot of trades were a lightning rod topic this year. We had the most trades we've ever had.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I know last year we had one big
We
trade.
had more people traded in one trade than we had in the entire 5 seasons of BSL.
It's crazy. So with that, there was talk about maybe freezing rosters or having the trade deadline be right after the draft or in the beginning, so the guys that you stick with are the guys that you play with. And a lot of that, people were like, okay, it's competition, but that's brotherhood, right? Because you build those guys over the season, you develop those guys, and you build those relationships as opposed to being like, oh, 2 weeks, you're not really fitting. Let's move you on. Like this, it's still a rec league, right? None of us are getting paid to play.
Yeah, for sure.
There's still an element. You draft those guys for a reason. No one's drafting guys being like, oh, I'm kind of stuck, and I have it's salary cap obligations I have to meet, so I have to fit this guy in because he's cheaper. It's not like everyone's of equal value going in. You pick the guys that you pick for whatever reason. A lot of guys pick guys because of talent, but also because of character and stuff like that. And
and it personally impacts players too.
For sure.
Right? Like Shamil told me afterwards that he didn't realize this when he made the trade was a couple of people that he traded for, the change in the schedule for them moving from one team to the other, right, impacted their availability for some games, right, or impacted their ability to attend personal functions that they had already planned for. So obviously, I never took that into consideration.
No, it's a very good point.
I never
thought about that.
Right? You kind of assume that, hey, listen, you're going to trade for the guys, and you still be available for the games that I'm trading them for, right? So, that's something we'll take into consideration, and that's a relatively easy fix, right?
Yeah, exactly, and it makes sense too, right? We don't have to have trades in the seats.
No, you don't.
It was always just it was an afterthought in previous seasons, and then last 2 years it hasn't been. It's become a way to kind of see strategically, and there's merit to trades, obviously, right? There's sometimes it's just some guys playing a certain position and you want to move them around because you find them more effective.
Yeah.
You need one thing more than the other. So a lot of times like it makes softball sense for sure, but this isn't just a softball league, right? So we have to keep that in mind.
Yeah,
so I thought that was good feedback. I thought it was great feedback, whatever Ray mentioned about the idea of volunteering and how I know the suggestion was to have a 2-tier system in terms of some guys are kind of take into account having those that volunteer a lot being able to have that be reflected in the league fees that they provide because they provide sweat equity and the other things that they do. I thought that was a very good point. This is it's a volunteer ran league.
We spoke about this in the past of giving players a rebate at the end of the year based on the contributions that they've given, right?
So if you sign up for something, I mean, everyone can sign up for something, but there's certain guys that do more than others, and there's certain guys that sign up with the intention of helping, certain guys that do a lot more, right? Than expected. And
so you can give them a bigger rebate, right? Depending on how much they volunteer over the course of a season. we can increase the league fees, and then at the end of the season, based on your volunteer contributions, we can give you some money back, or you can carry that over towards your next year's fees.
Exactly,
right?
or you can and knowing the guys in this league. I mean, with that in mind, some guys may not even take that, right? Because they just do it out of the goodness of their heart and their benefit of doing so. I thought those are kind of the three main things I saw. Another big one that surprised us was scheduling. Obviously, we don't know anything about it right now, but a poll question was brought up in terms of should we start games earlier, and there was a resounding support for it. Something that we never even thought we had to look into. Even when we were discussing the town hall beforehand, our focus was more so on playoff schedule than it was regular season. There was a lot of people that voiced being like, maybe it wouldn't be bad to move instead of from 2 to 8 doing 11 to 5 or 12 to 6. That way you can have your evening free for family stuff versus it being day stuff, but you're not starting early enough because it's 11 o'clock where it's interfering with your morning time with your kids.
Yeah, it was something we brought up in the last town hall that we had a couple of years ago. And I think the room was kind of split, right? It was like 40-60 that they wanted to change.
Yeah.
But this time when we did the poll, I think it was like 70-30 of guys that wanted to move the games earlier, right? So we can look into that. We can evaluate whether it makes sense or what time it makes sense to switch to, because there are other considerations we need to take into account, whether it's the field availability, whether it's the umpires availability, it's some players availability. I know there's some discussions of players that travel from far, getting there at 11 o'clock might mean they would have to leave at 9 a.m. in the morning in order to get there an hour early to get their warm-ups in or whatnot. So obviously there are some considerations we need to take. So something that we'll look into. But over the course of the winter, we'll take all those suggestions that were given and we'll evaluate them and whether they make sense and we can incorporate them, and we'll try to do our best. So we can just talk about the charities last.
Perfect. Okay, go ahead.
Because I know we're over the 40-minute limit that
we
we're
have a
trying
lot
to
to cover.
And obviously, right? It's the end of season.
So we're
not going to be doing this again for at least another 6 months.
Man. I mean, no, I'm kidding. But no, we wanted to combine all this stuff. And the main thing was we thought about doing it after playoffs. We thought about doing it after other things. But we wanted to make sure we gave shout outs to the award winners. We wanted to especially make sure that we had an opportunity to voice whatever happened at the town hall. Because although it was great to see half the league there, the other half wasn't. And they're being heard from them is as important, and them being aware of what's going on is as important.
We'll get their feedback. We'll send out a survey at some point over the next couple of weeks. So we'll still get their feedback on what they thought about the season and what we can continue to do to improve and change. But I mentioned this in the town hall about what we do as a league, right? We do this for the players. We do this for what the players want. So we're not here to compete with any other leagues because somebody else does something. That doesn't mean we have to do it. And we try to do what's best for our players and what fits the needs of our players, because you guys are what's most important to us, right? Beyond that, obviously, the community work and the charity work that we do is far more important than the games that we schedule, right? And that's why we've added a position this year with Shamil taking over as director of community and charity initiatives. So he's going to be leading up that initiative so that we have somebody that's fully dedicated to that, thinking about that all the time, and working with the different charities and the community groups that we support or would like to support on how we can do that. I think we had a phenomenal year last year where we raised almost $53,000. I think it was like
amazing.
$40 short of $53,000. So it was fantastic. It was a record-breaking year for us. It was because of all the players and their friends and sponsors and whatnot that contributed over the course of the season. But knowing the players that we have in our league and the reach that we have across the other leagues, I think we do a really poor job of tapping into Brotherhood Soccer and BSL Knights to get the same level of contribution from their league. So Shamil will be able to help with that. And then I can see us easily surpassing the 75K goal. Right?
Inshallah, man, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, so Shamil's working on a couple of projects that can kind of unite what we're trying to do, try to have a lasting impact on the community and the different groups that we work with. Special shout out to Islamic Relief. They were our platinum sponsor this year. They helped us out a lot, and in turn, we're going to continue our partnership with them and continue to grow with them and help the project that they have. So I think it was a fantastic year overall. I think this year, at least for me, flew by the fastest.
Yeah, I would say the same.
The season, I think we're going into the playoffs, and I was just like, wow, I can't even imagine that we're already in September. It kind of felt like the months and the weeks flew by so fast. Like I remember, I think it was week 4 or week 5, and like seriously, I felt like we just started the season.
Yeah.
But overall, it was a fantastic year. I think I hope everybody enjoyed themselves. Everybody enjoyed the additional content. These podcasts, Hashim and I kind of take time about our personal time. It's a Friday night at 10:30 right now that we're recording this.
Woo! Such fun people, yeah.
So hopefully, guys enjoyed it. These are just our perspectives on the league. We don't want to have to continue to do this every single week. So we are looking for guys that want to take up that initiative next year and kind of run with that.
That was some of the feedback at the town hall too, that the podcast is very well received, and to have more of them. We, from a content perspective, we cut out, there's only so many hours that we can devote, right, from our personal lives and from work and stuff like that. And we had foregone the weekly recaps this year. We would write usually on Sunday night or Monday, detailing whatever happened during the game, and replace that with more social media content with the players of the week, as well as the power rankings every single week, as well as with these podcasts. So there's been talk of maybe bringing in more podcasts and having something weekly if possible, but at least every little while, to kind of talk about what's happening in the league and replace that recap, because podcasts are a lot more digestible. People read them whenever people listen to them whenever they're at the gym or whenever they're driving or anything else like that, whenever they're commuting. So it becomes a lot easier than just words on the screen that we get from the rumors or from other write-ups. So there's been talk about that. There's also been talk about it being not so much means I, which is fine, because again, we're fortunate that we have a league of many volunteers and many great personalities and guys that be really good at this. So we're more than happy for it to involve other people. I think our first year for this was a success. Zah and I obviously have no training in this stuff, and we kind of we make a list of 4 things to talk about, and then we just kind of ramble about it. But what's great about this league is there's a lot of guys that are very invested in it, and they talk about it a lot. So having different opinions, having different voices on here, talking about stuff and things they notice will only add more fun to what this league's all about, and show that inclusive element of how much guys are invested in and how much they bring to the table.
Yeah, and we can have different guest speakers that kind of talk about their aspect of the league. Like we can bring Shamil on here to talk about the charitable work that we're planning to do.
Sponsors and stuff like that. Sure.
Sponsors can come on and kind of talk about how they're engaged with the league and the community. People that are involved in charitable projects, they can use this as a platform to get their message out to the rest of the league. So obviously we can do a better job of communicating within the league. I think that's something we have to work on next year.
Yeah,
it's kind of bring that the tight-knit community a little bit closer.
Yeah.
But I think for the first year, I think we did a pretty good job. Like you said, I've never done a podcast before. First one that we did was with the first 2 GMs that we did. I think it's been fun. I've enjoyed it.
I've enjoyed it too, and we appreciate all the feedback we got on it and people providing their commentary on things that we can improve on and things that we can cover. I guess that wraps up 2019 BSL season 6.
I know 2019 is over. Year 6 is done. We're focused on year 7.
Yeah, we once again thank all of you for listening. We thank all of our sponsors for this season for their immense support in us, allowing us to do whatever we do. We thank the players. We thank the GMs for helping run their teams and everything. We thank the volunteers. And again, as I mentioned, we thank all of you. So we hope you have a great fall and winter. You'll definitely be hearing from us. You're going to hear from the board with regards to the survey for the season, which will be anonymous. So we please ask that you provide your feedback, and we can keep this conversation going of how we can take BSL to the next level.
All right.
On behalf of Z and I, thank you guys all again. Congratulations to the Abbasids and all the award winners. And we look forward to talking to you guys in 2020.
All right.
Salam.